A heated confrontation in a grocery store takes an unexpected turn, leaving everyone in awe. Don't miss this powerful moment. And make sure to subscribe for more stories that move and inspire. It was an ordinary Saturday afternoon in Jefferson City, Missouri, at one of the busiest grocery stores on Main Street. The checkout lines were alive with the usual hum of weekend chatter, cash registers beeping, shopping carts rolling, and shoppers making casual conversation. Amid the buzz, a tall black man in his early 30s, dressed in a plain white shirt and jeans, stood patiently in line. He held a small basket with just a few items, a loaf of bread, some fruit, and a carton of milk. He seemed relaxed, casually chatting with the young cashier ahead of him. She smiled warmly, laughing at something he'd said about the unpredictable weather that week. Their interaction was easy, natural, and full of small-town charm, a moment of normalcy in the otherwise hurried atmosphere. Behind him, an older woman stood stiffly, her cart filled to the brim with groceries. She looked to be in her late 60s, with sharp features and a purse slung over her arm. Her eyes darted toward the man in front of her, and her expression hardened as she shifted impatiently from foot to foot. It began with a muttered comment, barely audible over the hum of the store. "Why don't you go back to Africa?" she said, her voice cutting through the chatter like a knife. The cashier froze mid-scan. The conversation between her and the man abruptly stopped. Around them, people in the other lines turned their heads. Conversations fell silent, and the air grew tense. The man didn't react right away. He glanced over his shoulder, his face unreadable. The woman behind him didn't back down. If anything, her jaw tightened as if daring him to respond. A mother a few lines over pulled her child closer to her side, while a young man near the deli counter raised his phone, trying to capture the moment. The room felt heavy with anticipation, as though everyone was holding their breath, waiting to see what would happen next. But instead of the outburst they were expecting, the man turned to her with a calmness that made the silence even more deafening. The tension in the store was almost palpable. The man slowly turned to face the woman, his movements deliberate, as if he were carefully measuring the weight of the moment. His calm demeanor seemed to unsettle her, though she kept her chin raised defiantly. "Excuse me," he said, his voice steady but low enough that it forced those nearby to lean in slightly to hear. The woman crossed her arms and scoffed, doubling down. "You heard me," she said sharply. "I said what I said. People like you don't belong here." The weight of her words hung in the air, and a ripple of discomfort spread through the crowd. A man in a baseball cap further down the line whispered to his wife, who frowned but didn't intervene. The cashier, a young woman with bright blue nail polish, looked from the man to the woman, her face flushed with discomfort. The man's expression didn't change. He stood there, unmoving, his gaze fixed on the woman. There was no anger in his eyes, just a calm intensity that seemed to make her falter slightly. But she quickly recovered, gripping the handle of her cart as if it were a shield. A teenage girl in the next line whispered to her father, "Dad, are you going to say something?" Her father shook his head, muttering, "It's not our place." The man finally broke the silence, his voice carrying a calm yet commanding tone. "Do you know where I'm from?" he asked her, his words deliberate. The woman raised an eyebrow, her lips pursed in annoyance. "What difference does it make?" she shot back. He didn't respond right away. Instead, he took a step closer, not in aggression, but with the quiet confidence of someone who knew the power of their words. "It makes all the difference," he said. His voice, though calm, had an edge of steel that made everyone pause. The crowd was transfixed now, their groceries forgotten. Even the store manager, who had been watching nervously from near the customer service desk, seemed rooted to the spot. The man glanced around the store, his eyes briefly meeting those of the onlookers. "This is my home," he said, his voice steady. "My family's been here for generations. My great-grandfather built houses in this very city, homes that some of your families might live in today. My grandmother was a nurse who worked double shifts to care for this community during its hardest times. He turned back to the woman, his tone unwavering. "Where are you from?" he asked, the question hanging in the air like a challenge. The woman blinked, seemingly caught off guard. She opened her mouth to respond, but no words came out. Her fingers tightened around the handle of her cart. Around them, the crowd shifted, their discomfort giving way to something else. Curiosity, perhaps, or even guilt. Some lowered their eyes, unable to meet his gaze. Others looked at the woman, their expressions a mix of disapproval and expectation. The man took another step forward, his posture calm but unyielding. "This country," he said, "was built by people who look like me. People who toiled, who suffered, who fought, and who persevered. My ancestors endured more than you could imagine, and they did it so that future generations, your generation and mine, could have the freedom to stand in a store like this and buy groceries without fear of being told we don't belong." His words were measured, each one hitting its mark. The cashier's eyes welled up, and she quickly wiped them with the back of her hand. A few people in the crowd nodded subtly, their expressions softening as the man's message began to sink in. The woman, however, remained silent. Her defiance seemed to waver, her expression shifting from one of anger to something less certain. But she didn't speak, her grip on the cart tightening as if it were the only thing anchoring her to the moment. The man paused, letting the weight of his words settle over the room, and for a moment the silence was louder than any argument could have been. The man exhaled softly, his composure unbroken. He glanced around the room, briefly making eye contact with the cashier, a woman in a floral blouse near the magazine stand, and the young man with his phone still raised. He then turned back to the older woman, his voice quiet but steady. "You see," he began, "when I hear words like yours, they don't break me. They don't even surprise me anymore. But what they do remind me of is just how much work there is left to do." The woman opened her mouth as if to interrupt, but the man raised a hand slightly, not as a command, but as a signal to let him finish. "You told me to go back to Africa," he said. "Let me tell you about the Africa you seem to think I belong to." He spoke with an intensity that seemed to draw everyone closer, as though they couldn't help but lean in to catch every word. "My ancestors were taken from their homes, their families, their lives, and brought here in chains. They didn't choose this land, but they made it their own. They built the foundation of this country, brick by brick, field by field, generation by generation. Their sweat, their tears, their blood are in the soil beneath your feet." His voice grew steadier, filling the space as he continued. "And when slavery ended, they didn't stop building. My great-grandfather worked as a carpenter right here in Missouri. He built homes, churches, schools, places where families could live and grow and dream. My grandmother, she was one of the first black nurses at the local hospital. She worked through segregation, through prejudice, through long nights when no one wanted to take orders from her because of the color of her skin. But she didn't give up." The woman shifted uncomfortably, her arms crossing tighter over her chest. The crowd was rapt now, their focus solely on him. "And my father," he continued, his voice softening slightly. "He fought in Vietnam. He served a country that still wouldn't serve him in many restaurants when he came home. But he still believed in the promise of America. He believed in its potential to be better." The older woman's eyes darted to the ground, and her jaw slackened ever so slightly. "And me?" the man said, his tone unwavering. "I was born here. I went to school here. I work here. I've paid my taxes, volunteered in my community, and raised my children to love this country, not because it's perfect, but because it's ours." He gestured around the store, his hand sweeping across the faces of those watching. "This country isn't just yours," he said firmly. "It's ours. It's all of ours. And I'm not going anywhere. I belong here just as much as you do, maybe more, considering how long my family's been fighting for the right to simply exist in peace." A murmur rippled through the crowd, faint but noticeable. A man near the frozen foods aisle folded his arms, nodding in silent agreement. The cashier wiped another tear from her cheek, her hands still resting on the conveyor belt. The older woman's face was flushed now, her initial bravado clearly shaken. But the man wasn't finished. "I'm not telling you this to make you feel bad," he said, his tone softening. "I'm telling you this because you need to understand something. Hate doesn't solve anything. It doesn't build anything. All it does is tear people down. And it tears you down too. Carrying that kind of anger, that kind of bitterness, it doesn't just hurt the people you aim it at. It hurts you. It shrinks you. And you don't deserve that. None of us do." His words lingered in the air, the weight of them pressing down on everyone in the room. The woman's grip on her cart loosened slightly, her fingers trembling. The man took a step back, giving her space. "You don't have to like me," he said. "You don't have to agree with me. But you should know that I'm not your enemy. I'm your neighbor. And whether you like it or not, we're in this together." There was a pause, a long moment of silence that felt like the world had stopped turning. The crowd seemed to hold its collective breath, waiting for the woman's response, or for the man to say more. But he didn't. He simply stood there, his gaze steady, as if giving her the chance to process everything he'd said. And in that silence, something shifted, not just in her but in everyone watching. The silence stretched, thick and unbroken, as if the store itself were holding its breath. The older woman blinked rapidly, her expression a mix of confusion, defensiveness and, most surprisingly, reflection. Her lips parted slightly, as if to speak, but no words came out. Around them, the onlookers remained transfixed, their gazes darting between the man and the woman. It was clear that the words he had spoken had struck a chord, not just with her, but with everyone in earshot. The cashier, a young woman no older than 22, was the first to break the silence. That was beautiful," she said, her voice trembling with emotion. "Thank you for saying that." She didn't try to hide the tears streaking her cheeks as she looked at the man with genuine gratitude. Others in the store began to murmur among themselves. An older gentleman in a denim jacket clapped his hands together once, a slow, deliberate gesture that seemed to spark a chain reaction. One by one, people in the crowd joined in, their applause hesitant at first but growing stronger with each passing second. The sound of the clapping filled the store, echoing off the high ceilings and cutting through the tension like sunlight piercing through storm clouds. It wasn't a loud ovation. It wasn't meant to be. But it carried an unmistakable sincerity. The man acknowledged the crowd with a small, gracious nod. "Thank you," he said softly, his voice carrying the same quiet dignity that had defined his response. The older woman stood frozen, her face a mask of uncertainty. Her hands, which had been gripping the cart tightly, fell to her sides. Her cheeks were flushed, and her eyes glistened with unshed tears. Finally she spoke, her voice barely audible. I didn't mean—" She paused, searching for the right words. "I didn't think—" The man held up a hand, gently cutting her off. "It's okay," he said, his tone as forgiving as it was firm. "What matters is what you do from here. We all make mistakes. What defines us is how we choose to grow from them." Her lips quivered as she nodded, a single tear slipping down her cheek. I'm sorry," she whispered, the words fragile but genuine. The man offered her a small, understanding smile. "Apology accepted," he said simply. The crowd, which had been watching the exchange with bated breath, seemed to exhale collectively. A sense of relief and resolution washed over the room, softening the tension that had hung in the air just moments before. But the moment wasn't over. From the back of the crowd, a young boy, no older than 10, stepped forward, clutching a candy bar in one hand. "Mister," he said, his voice shy but clear, "what you said was really brave." The man knelt slightly to meet the boy's gaze, his expression warm and encouraging. "Thank you," he said. "But you know what? Kindness is the bravest thing anyone can do. If you remember that, you'll always be strong." The boy smiled shyly and stepped back into the arms of his mother, who gave the man a grateful look. The store manager, who had been lingering near the customer service desk, finally approached. He cleared his throat, clearly uncomfortable, but wanting to address the situation. "Sir," he said to the man, "on behalf of our store, I want to apologize for what happened here today. That kind of behavior isn't acceptable, and we'll make sure it's addressed." The man looked at him for a moment, then extended his hand. "Thank you," he said, shaking the manager's hand firmly. "I appreciate that." The older woman stood off to the side, watching the exchange with a mixture of relief and humility. She seemed smaller somehow, not in stature, but in the way her earlier anger had melted away, leaving only the raw vulnerability of someone who had been forced to confront their own flaws. As the applause died down and the crowd began to disperse, there was a sense that something profound had just happened. A moment of collective growth, sparked by one man's courage to respond with dignity instead of anger. The store gradually returned to its usual rhythm, but the energy in the air was different, quieter, more reflective. Customers picked up their carts and baskets, some still glancing back at the man, as if to carry a part of the moment with them. The older woman, now visibly drained, lingered near the edge of the checkout line. She seemed unsure of what to do next, her gaze flickering between the floor and the man she had confronted. The man, sensing her hesitation, gave her a small nod, an unspoken gesture of closure. As he turned back to the cashier to pay for his groceries, the young woman behind the counter leaned forward slightly. "You know," she said, her voice low but earnest, "I'll never forget what you said today. I think a lot of us won't." The man smiled, though it was tinged with a hint of weariness. "Thank you," he replied. "Sometimes it's not about what you say, but how you say it. People need reminders that we're all connected, whether we like it or not." She nodded, her expression thoughtful. "I think you reminded a lot of people of that today." As the man took his bags and began to walk toward the exit, he paused near the young boy who had spoken earlier. "Hey," he said softly, crouching down to the boy's eye level. "You remember what I told you, right? About kindness being brave?" The boy nodded enthusiastically, his candy bar still clutched tightly in his hand. "I'll remember," he said. The man patted him on the shoulder. "Good. You'll make the world better, just by holding on to that." He straightened up and walked toward the doors, the afternoon sun spilling in through the glass. The automatic doors slid open with a soft whoosh, and he stepped outside, his head held high. Inside, the older woman stood silently by her cart, her expression pensive. She watched the man leave, her own thoughts clearly running deep. Maybe she would carry this moment with her for the rest of her days. A turning point, a lesson learned the hard way. As the store returned to its usual hum of activity, the memory of the exchange lingered like a quiet ripple through the crowd. People resumed their shopping, but their expressions seemed lighter, as if they had all been given a moment to reflect on what had transpired. Sometimes it takes a moment of confrontation to break the cycle of ignorance, a single voice to inspire change. And sometimes all it takes is a reminder of our shared humanity to build a bridge where a wall once stood. If this story resonates with you, don't let it end here. Share this message with others. Take a stand for kindness, dignity, and understanding, because the world becomes better when we choose to face hate with courage and compassion. Make sure to subscribe for more stories that challenge, inspire, and remind us of the power of our shared humanity.